good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. And I feel kind of small here because I've got a giant to my left and a giant to my right here, David Delk and Lloyd Marbett. I mean giants in the sense that they're concerned about human welfare and things that are critically important for human beings and for American citizens. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go on. Title of the show is Citizen Activist Lloyd Marbett. And before we started the cameras rolling, I was ragged on by Lloyd because I didn't mention David.
I got roped into this.
But I decided to change the subtitle of the show because I went to your website and I saw so darn much about you. You've got a lifetime dedicated to hard work, including almost shutting down the Trojan nuclear power plant. I mean, you have put it on the line. But
yeah, for a long time, yeah.
Not only that, but you got poetry going on and all sorts of stuff. And go to his website and get turned on to Lloyd Marbett. You guys know David Delk. He's been on the show 1,000 times before. And he's really
another towering
hard.
Giant.
Yes, really. That's a fact. So
yeah, I objected. I really felt you should have had him on here as an equal. And he is on as an equal. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don. We're starting already, Lloyd.
No.
Just give me a minute and I'll be quiet.
Okay.
Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there, and including these two guys, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that they decide to talk about tonight. And we've got a bunch of papers and stuff to talk about, and we're going to get blown away before it's over. We're going to need more than 58 minutes, but we'll manage to get by with 58 minutes, all right?
Good.
I'm really excited about having the two of you here.
Yeah, it's an honor to be with both of you.
And so what I will do then, I don't have a brief bio on you, David. Will you start off by saying who you are and what you're about, your organization you're with, the national and the local, and the things you're involved with, just in a few minutes' time?
Okay. Well, let's see. Native Portlander, lived here almost all my life. Ask me some questions. That's so fun.
You got a resume.
So, what's your full name? What was the name they gave you when you were born?
David Eldon Delk.
Eldon, where'd that name come
that.
from?
Wow.
Well, actually, it's an interesting question about where my middle name came from. I have a twin brother. And
no kidding, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and we were born in an apartment building close to downtown Portland. And my mother had divorced my father before we were born. And Eldon was a gentleman who lived in another apartment on the same floor. My mother did not want to have my father's name on the birth certificate.
Wow.
And so Eldon, and I forget what his last name is, I'd have to look at my birth certificate. His name is on my birth certificate as my father.
And he agreed to that?
And he agreed to that. No, nobody in their right mind would do this today. But
wow. Well, so your mom was out there.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was. Yeah, she was a very strong person, and you know, she wasn't going to put up with an abusive husband.
Far out.
And so even in spite of knowing that she was going to have twins, she divorced him.
What a powerful story.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, really.
Anything significant about your cultural or national heritage that's worth mentioning?
No, I'm just a standard white guy.
You see where this is going. We haven't even got started yet.
Let's see. The only thing I didn't know my father, don't really know anything about it. I understand he was Dutch. On my mother's side.
So you never met him
Never
afterwards?
met him. And he lived here in Portland all of his life. He died.
You're kidding. Wow.
I never ever met him. And so
that's kind of sad in a way. Did you ever have a desire to, or you just felt like it was?
No, I felt like if he didn't have a desire to see me, I didn't have.
I
didn't know
so
him.
you were
the heck with him.
I didn't know him.
Yeah, that's right.
How about a religious preference? Do you have one?
Well, I'm
one?
not a religious person. My mother was Catholic. She never made us go to church. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now I'm a Unitarian.
What kind of work are you doing in your life now?
Right now, I'm working for in a purchasing office at a public agency, and I am doing the Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage enforcement for contractors. So my job is to be sure that contractors are paying their workers at least prevailing wage.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you look at all the contracts that the school system's involved in?
No, this is actually the housing authority.
Housing authority,
right.
okay.
And I look at all the payroll records that they submit.
Wow.
To be sure, and you know, there's some interesting things.
I bet.
Right. Yeah. But by and large, most of the contractors are doing what they're supposed to. You know, and if they don't, quite frequently, this is not the simplest kind of thing. And mistakes can get made. So you know, I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but you know, we have found a couple that were like, wow.
Amazing.
Right.
And you're doing this on top of your activist work as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I work full time. Right.
Amazing.
Full time work. Right.
Amazing.
Right, yeah.
So then, my next host question is: do you have a partner, a companion? Or?
Well, yeah, I do. I have a partner. He and I have been together for 16 years.
16 years.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He really is. Don't know what I would do without him.
He worries about you.
He worries.
The reason why I mentioned that, we were talking about this before.
Hi, Tom.
Really.
Tom's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a real caregiver. He works for Multnomah County, and he's a. I always describe, and he always corrects me, I always describe him as a social worker. He works for Aging and Disability Services.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
So he checks on right now he's checking on complaints on nursing homes and care facilities that might come in. So.
How long have you guys been together now? I mean, you've been together as long as I've known you.
Yeah, well, it's 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
right, yeah. And then my partner prior to that, he and I were together for 5 years, and he died of AIDS.
Wow.
And so, yeah. Right.
And your political persuasion, are you a Rush Limbaugh supporter?
No.
The cameraman
he never sits quiet for too long. If we get too far left, then he carries
Really,
on.
I should go sit in his chair. He should come here and we should do a good interview.
Yeah. No, I don't particularly care for him. I am much more on the left-hand side of the political spectrum. I vacillate between registering as a Democrat right before the primary, so that I can vote in the primary, and then I go back to being a Green.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at with that stuff.
Moving right along now, what's important?
What's important? What's
Wow,
important
what a
to me?
question.
What's important to me is that I act in ways that further. I always want something more specific than just social justice, but I guess
How about well-being?
Well-being, yeah.
You've
the
always
well-being
been concerned
of all
about
people.
well-being. That's right.
That's
and
a
the
very
earth.
good term. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So and so my activities have been around things that have to do with inequalities and righting them. Injustices, and then environmental things, and things concerning about the vast increase in the wealth of the very top of the world's population, and the impoverishment of the vast majority of people,
right,
and the growing impoverishment of people.
That is important,
right.
Yes.
And doing what I can to see that stops.
And you have been. Now, one more question for you before we shift over here to my friend Lloyd. Can you make me smile or laugh? You got a funny story or something?
Listen to this.
You just did it.
I've done a joke. Right.
Okay, see, you're marvelous. Right.
That's it. That's the best I can do.
How many times have you been on the show? Have you kept trying?
No, I haven't. I would guess this was 6 or 7 or 8, or I don't know.
We were 7 or 8 more times coming up.
Okay, great.
How many of these shows have you done?
Oh, this is my 7th year, I guess.
Wow.
We do a fresh show every week.
Wow.
And I get all kinds of interesting people, and occasionally a band. And I had Steve Novick on, and Merkley's supposed to come on, and Rob Drake is going to come on.
Oh,
next
wow.
month. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I was going to be on once after a band. You recorded the band, and then it took so long to take the band down. But
I'm
you
not
just
listening,
had
you're embarrassed. I don't
I
know
had to
that
stand
very well,
outside, and then I had to go home.
home.
That's all right.
So shall we switch over here to Mr. Lloyd K. Marbett? I'm going to read this short bio that you gave me to be sure to cover everything before you start talking. Okay, listen, go to his website, and I hope it's going to be on the screen here. This guy has done so many things, poetry and speeches and essays and the whole shot. I'm not exaggerating. Go to that, you'll be utterly charmed. He's a man who's really worked at a lot. But anyhow, let me read this. Lloyd Marbett is the executive director of the Oregon Conservancy Foundation, a non-profit, tax-exempt public interest foundation promoting the use of conservation and renewable energy resources, along with the protection and preservation of watersheds in Oregon. He has been a long-time environmental consumer activist, participating in a number of public interest campaigns to increase awareness about the inherent problems in the operation of a nuclear fuel cycle, and he has also been involved in the movement to reclaim democracy through campaign finance reform and taking corporations out of the business of manipulating elections. In 2001, Lloyd received an award from the Dalai Lama, along with 49 other people from around the world, for being an unsung hero of compassion. He has lived in Oregon since 1969 and has 2 children, a daughter, Gathering, who is 38, and a son, Ty, who is 20 and
He'll be 21.
21.
On Saturday.
On Saturday. What struck me most is the award from the Dalai Lama. And I saw on the website you with this magical human being, and there you are. You can see the back of your head.
Yeah.
So
and that bald spot's still there too.
Yeah. So you have really been out there doing kinds of stuff, but then well, let's take it from there, and you can take over and decide what else you want to tell us about yourself, and we'll just work right into what it is that you want to talk about tonight to illustrate that you are a citizen activist that's doing good work.
Well, you know, what's ironic about all this is I appreciate so much the reference to the work that I've done and also to the work that David's done.
Yes.
But I thought we were coming here to talk about the elections.
Yes.
I wasn't here to really blow my whistle.
I'm blowing your whistle.
I know you are.
And if that's all you want to
you know, it kind of feels like that old TV show, This Is Your Life,
yeah,
you know, where you suddenly
yeah.
get sprung on you that this is coming down. So, but that's, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
And indeed, it's what you guys want to talk about.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
But I wanted to get that about what you've been about, and I wanted to have the viewers know that.
It's been an interesting
journey. There's a lot
journey.
of time left.
It's been an interesting journey, and the Chinese have a curse which says, "May your life be interesting." So
here we go. We're off and running. Yes.
So I can actually see that from some of the things we've all been going through. God, let me tell you.
So why don't you start, and then we'll ask questions or take us to the direction you want to talk about, and we'll participate.
Well, you know, in thinking about the elections, I actually wanted to pay homage to someone who I think has been quite articulate in recent time about just the nature of the electoral process and what it is that we've been going through, and that is Steve Dean of the Oregonian. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to quote from 2 articles that he did, one of which was 19 days before the election.
The Oregonian, our local paper here in Portland.
Right.
Yeah, because this show goes to national locations.
Oh, great. Well, Steve is a wonderful man, I think. I've been an admirer of him for some time, and I really think he's hit it on the head as far as the state of our electoral process. 19 days before the election, he said, 47 of our 50 states have placed limits on political campaign contributions, believing it is possible to constrain the corrosive impact of money on elective politics without restricting free speech. Oregon is one of 3 holdouts, the state Supreme Court having decreed that when it comes to political contributions and live sex acts on stage, anything goes. And then he goes on to say, and so the mess remains, a campaign finance system in which big money from unions and corporations alike put candidates in office, then persuades them, like Tony Soprano style, to let sleeping dogs lie. And it is really so right on the money. So we have this election, by the way, an election in which all the major races were won by candidates, except for one, were won by candidates who had raised and spent the most campaign money. And by the way, the one that wasn't was the Kroger campaign, Attorney General. And here's Steve starting out an excellent editorial again on May 22nd, in which he says, money wants the lead, money thinks it's the story. After all, money, much of it from unions that bank on predictable to smother reform, greased Kate Brown's slide into the Secretary of State's office. She raised over $500,000. That's an Oregon race for Secretary of State. Jeff Merkley in the Senate primary. In just about every race except Attorney General, victory went to the man or the woman who spent the most money. And so,
is it money free speech?
No, I don't believe money's free speech, and I think that's the big mistake. Even the fact that the Supreme Court, and actually I think it was through a court reporter who messed it up for us, setting this precedent that somehow or another, corporations have the same kind of free speech rights as sovereign people have. It's a huge tragedy, and yet we're experiencing it once again in this most recent election. And it's funny. I was thinking to myself, there is a movement called the slow food movement, and we have this movement because fast food has really corrupted our nutrition. It's basically made meals into kind of like wham bam, thank you ma'am. It's just in and out and gone.
The slow food movement.
The slow food movement.
Slow food.
I think we need a slow electoral movement, in the sense that elections are like that now too. It's all devolved into these sound bites. Most of the people that won their campaigns were able to finance their commercials on television. It's all quick, smaller and smaller amounts of information. You really don't get the substantive feel for what it is that we're actually participating in. And I think the powers that be want it that way, deliberately have wanted it that way, because they'd rather play on our emotions and our ignorance than have us in any way be enlightened about the substantive nature of what it is that we're voting on. I think we need a slow democracy movement, if you want it, in which it kind of slows down, and we really begin to take a look at how we can improve the nature of the communication that takes place before people begin to make their choices.
So a slow democracy movement is where things are slowed down enough, where people are given objective information.
Yes.
I don't think, for me, it's not so much slowing down the process. Maybe that's a way of phrasing it.
Please.
But let me finish. People need to have complete information, or more complete information, about what's involved with issues concerning their life.
Right.
And the way it's set up now, it's going so fast that people are having opinions and decisions thinking that they're informed, and they're not.
And right, exactly. But it's not even just limited to that, because we need these reforms. We need limitations on campaign contribution expenditures. We need instant runoff voting, which is something that David will not allow this show to go by without us talking about.
I hope not.
And we need to take back democracy.
And we need to have public funding of elections.
And public funding of elections is a
voter-owned elections.
That's right. Another important element of that. That's right. And I support all that. And I will not you know, I'm not going to attempt to say that I don't have my preferences in this election. I do. I'm a Ralph Nader supporter, and I am
So am I.
upfront about it. In fact, I guess we all are at this table. And the reason why I support Ralph is because, unlike most of the other candidates that I look at and have looked at over the years, this is a candidate who's walked the talk, and I believe that if I vote for him and he gets into office, he will do what he says he's going to do. And to me, he's earned my vote. I mean, that's where it's at, and I'm not willing to sell my vote short anymore for wonderful speeches like Barack makes, or the kind of manipulations that the Clintons have been involved in for year after year after year. We're talking politics, but you know, it is what's going down.
One of the things about Ralph Nader is that when he speaks, he does speak specifically about the kind of reforms that he wants to see happen.
Right.
You know, whereas
right.
you know,
I don't
these
hear
other candidates are so
they
generalized.
talk about the problem. That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's
and
exactly
they don't
right.
talk about specifically what they would do to change the problem.
Right.
Okay, before we go any further, I've been notified by my wonderful director that it's time to take a break because we've got to put some information up on the screen. Hi, Dennis. And don't drop your teeth anymore.
Is that how he gets your attention?
I love it. I love it. We're going to put up on the screen some important information that you may want to write down during the break, so get a pencil, a pen, and some paper, and don't put those slides up until I ask you to. Broadcast information. For you viewers who live in the Washington County part of the Portland, Oregon metro area, Conversations with Dr. Don shows are broadcast 5 times each week. Typically, a new show is first aired on a Tuesday and is rebroadcast on the following Friday through Monday. There's a live call-in show that we're not going to talk about tonight because Dennis will yell at me. And you can see Dr. Don on the internet. You can tell your computer-using friends to watch Dr. Don shows on the internet anytime by going to video.google.com and entering. We have some key Washington, D.C. phone numbers because some things we'll talk about their national significance, and you may want to talk to your representative or senator or even the president's office about what you're so fired up about. So those phone numbers are going to be up on the screen in a moment so you can get through to the D.C. switchboards. Call Washington and tell them what you want and don't want them to do. Most of them really do want to hear from you. They really do. We're now going to put up on the screen, during the break, 4 panels. The broadcast schedule, the live call-in show information for the Portland, Oregon metro view area, the internet address to view the Dr. Don shows, and the U.S. Capitol key phone numbers. We can do it now, Dennis. Okay, the mic's on. We're back, and thank you for sticking around after you went and had a beer or some coffee or something. Anyhow, for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one of a kind individuals and about what it is that we decided to talk about tonight. And I could not have two more interesting guests than to my left, David Delk and Lloyd Marbett here. And I want to say again, go to Lloyd Marbett's website, deucedly interesting citizen activist. And he's still mad at me for titling the show.
The site needs to be updated.
As wonderful as it is now. So
Great.
let's pick up where we left off, except we want to be sure that we have David Delk talk about instant runoff voting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And why don't you start off this segment and tell us what that's about.
Okay, all right. Well, Lloyd was talking about campaign finance reform and how we need to do that. We need to limit campaign contributions and expenditures, and Lloyd and I have both worked on that extensively. Lloyd longer than I have, but I was lucky enough to have my name on at least one of the two initiatives, one of which passed a couple of years ago.
If we'd only put your name on the other one, it would
Yeah,
have
right,
done the
yeah.
trick. I'm
Yeah, I'm sure that would be it, right, yeah. At any rate, so we're halfway to campaign finance reform in Oregon, but we're not there yet. So there's work yet to be done on that. But one of the other reforms that we need, one of many other reforms, is instant runoff voting. And our current system allows a candidate to get into office without having a majority of the vote. So the first thing that instant runoff voting, the first benefit of instant runoff voting is that the candidates, in order to assume office, actually have to have a majority of the vote. And this would be particularly important, like if we had used instant runoff voting in 2000 at the federal level in the presidential election, Gore and Bush.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it is hard to say. Yes. And then the third person was Nader. And if we had instant runoff voting, those people that wanted to vote for Nader, number one, could have done so with ease. And so we would have a better way of recording what people's real beliefs are.
And actually, we might actually vote the real beliefs in.
So
yes, right.
Let's now, for the people who don't know much about instant runoff voting, give us a basic ABC of what instant runoff voting is.
Well, it's a different way of voting.
He's using the three examples where you got what, Bush and Gore and Nader.
Right. Yeah. And so in that election, what you would do, if that was where we were using it, you would, as a voter, you would rank the candidates instead of voting for a single candidate.
You were going there, all right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
And so you have the ability to rank your preference of candidates. So in my case,
you didn't even have to put Bush last unless you wanted to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And
Rick's gonna get us.
Right. And so and you can vote for just a single person if you want to. But in my case, I would have voted for Ralph Nader, number one, and then Al Gore, number two. And then assuming that Ralph Nader would have the lowest number of votes, then he would be eliminated after the votes were first counted, and those people who voted for them would have their votes transferred to the second choice.
So the ballots would then be counted again on a second round of counting.
That's right.
With elimination of the lowest.
You got it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
got it.
And then you continue that process until you have someone who actually has a majority of the vote. And and then
and it basically does away with the choice of evils problem.
Yes,
I mean that's really what you're looking at here.
And the whole thing, because the Democrats and Nader, although sometimes it's hard to see the commonalities, you have more commonalities than Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
And so those commonalities get to be emphasized instead of the differences. So where in that election there was this great animosity between the Nader people and the Democrats. When the animosity should have been between the Democrats and the Republicans, it got sidetracked. Nader was called a spoiler, and therefore a lot of people wouldn't vote for him.
Or as I would put it, again, the animosity between the Democrats and the Democrats that voted for the Republicans.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So that would be be just a dramatic and important consideration in the electoral process.
Right, yeah, so that would be the effect if you did that on the national level. We're obviously not going to go there right away.
Right.
And so the question is, how do we do this? And we do this by doing it locally first. And so in the Oregon State Legislature, well, actually in the Oregon Constitution, there's a provision for instant runoff voting. But our Secretary of State and our Attorney General, our present ones, have both declared that you can't do that unless the state passes enabling legislation. So we've never actually used it, in spite of the fact it's actually been in the Constitution for 100 years. Right, yes.
Proportional representation, instant runoff voting, the state power authority, all of it's in the Constitution. None of it's been implemented by the legislators. None of it.
And who is preventing it from being implemented?
Well, you know, as the legislative sessions meet and the big money interests elect in enough people to thwart any kind of opportunity to refer out or even implement it on their own, which they can do within the legislature, they oppose it.
So that takes it to the next thing that needs to be done, is getting the money out of the political process.
I believe that that's the bottom line.
How are we going to do that?
Right. Well, that's what we've attempted to do over and over, and we've been thwarted. You know, you take the example of the state Senate race or the U.S. Senate race. You know, Steve Novick and Merkley. You know, Merkley skated in because of his big money association. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he had enough revenue in order to turn that race around.
These are two candidates for the U.S. Senate, Democrats, to challenge Gordon Smith.
The irony of it is that Novick opposed campaign finance reform. He was an opponent of 46 and 47 when we had our ballot measures. What an irony. I mean, and that's because of he was beholden to labor, which opposed campaign finance reform, because the problem with campaign finance reform, as I'm sure we all agree at the table, is everybody loves it, but nobody wants to apply it to themselves. And that's what we're up against. It really is. It's sad. It's just sad. You know, and you know, here's an example in which I think it would have made the difference for Novick. You know, but you know, he made his bed.
Yeah. Well, and as Steve Dunn in your newspaper article says, money is what determines who wins offices. And so what we really need to do is, you know, like we said, is get the limitations on campaign contributions and expenditures, and then get public funding of elections so that the playing field is level.
We need to finish the revolution is what we need.
Now, isn't part of it? Those two things are operable in different parts of the country now, in some communities or some cities?
Well, there's, you know, in terms of limitations on campaign contributions, 47 states have limitations. Oregon is one of only 3 that has no limits whatsoever.
I thought Oregon was a left-wing communist operation here.
You're absolutely wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, Oregon is just totally backward on this one thing. Now, a lot of those states don't have very effective limitations.
Right, and you can argue that.
Right.
I mean,
but Oregon has not.
But they have something.
Right, they have something in place. We have nothing at all. Nothing at all.
How are we going to get something?
Well, right now we're in the courts. You know, Dan Meek, who has been a longtime proponent.
Dan Meek is who? He's a what?
He's an attorney, a public interest lawyer here in Oregon.
Here in Oregon.
Great. You should have him on your show. He is a wonderful man. I have nothing but great respect for him.
Yeah,
David knows him.
Right.
I mean, he is really a man of great caliber. I would, you know, have him at this table.
Yeah, he's the one who's written all these initiatives that we've done on campaign finance reform.
And he's been at it a long time, and he's brilliant. He's one of the most brilliant lawyers that I know, and I have great admiration for him. He's up there with Nader. There's no doubt about it.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I will remember that. So we got to keep fighting it and keep battling until we get it.
Absolutely. And then in the meantime, I think we have to put pressure on the issues that we're concerned about in the existing system that is so flawed, which, you know, we need to put a stop to this war. It should have ended yesterday. The Democrats have sold us out. The Republicans have already sold us out from the very beginning. I mean, they deceived us, and this is where we're at now. You know, one of the things that blows me away about this election is another one of those great issues, global warming. You know, there was an article by Bill McKibben that was in the May 11, 2008 Los Angeles Times entitled "Civilization's Last Chance. The planet is nearing a tipping point on climate change, and it gets much worse fast." Where's the political discussion on that? My God, I never heard any of the candidates running out there trying to get our votes for the House, for the Senate, talk about global warming. What's going on here? I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. The paucity of, and Nader, you know, who was in town recently, I mean, he just, you go listen to him speak, and you know, I love Ralph. One of the things that I always think is he goes a little too long for a lot of people because, you know, he covers the whole gamut. I mean, he really covers the whole gamut. I want somebody like that to represent me. I want somebody who's willing to cover the whole gamut. I don't care if it puts some people out of the room because they had to go home early. I just think it's where it's at, and it's long overdue.
And you did the opening for his last visit here.
It was an honor. Yeah, it was quite an honor, and it was a last-minute honor, and I was blown away by it. But I attempted to rise to the occasion.
And you did.
Thank you.
So, okay, where do we go next now? What do you want to talk about next?
Well, let's get out there and get this world turned around. I mean it. You know?
Do you think the media is pretty objective when it comes to talking about what's going on with this presidential campaign, for example?
No, you know, even the media you know, I saw that what was it, that presidential debate with Channel 2, you know, the news guy for Channel 2 and Stephanopoulos. It was disgusting.
Awful.
It was just damn disgusting. But that's what's happened to news. News has become sensationalism. You know, what do you talk about? You talk about the guy's preacher. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's not about
or
the
lapel
substantive.
pins, right.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, whether or not you wear a flag. I mean, give me a break. Is it gotten this disgusting so fast? Actually, it's been coming on for a long time. We need to turn this around. We need to demand a greater accountability. We need, you know, that slow democracy movement. I guess.
Okay, I got to work on that a little more. Okay.
It's just me playing with a phrase.
Well, the other thing we need to have media that is not corporate owned.
Yes.
You know, that is one of the big problems, that they are looking to spend as little money as possible to investigate issues, and then when and if they do, then they on purpose don't give us any information about it, so that they focus strictly on these superficial differences.
Right.
You know, like talking about healthcare, is the plans for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are almost identical. And the other option was never talked about is a single-payer, you know, Canadian-style healthcare system. But it's never ever talked about.
I heard him in a speech where he was talking about how, you know, we're going to make it so that health insurance is affordable. Yeah. And right off, I mean, it's just, in my mind, bingo, business as usual.
Business as usual.
It's the same old pattern. Same old result. That's what we're getting here. And, you know, like I say, Barack Obama is a very articulate man, but where's the foundation here? I'm really wondering what he's standing on, whose shoulders is pushing him up, you know, because he sounds like the big pharmaceutical companies is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, well, you certainly know, you know, he wanted to bring you know, in his early speeches, he was talking about bringing everybody to the table and, you know, in getting unity and all this stuff. And, you know, one of the people on healthcare that he wanted to bring to the table was the insurance companies. Right. It's like, this is the problem.
It is the problem.
That's the problem.
Right. It's time to get rid of the middleman.
So you have a list of items here, and I have the same list.
Oh, that's Nader's list. It's a wonderful list.
Tick them off. Shall I tick them off or what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Don't stand for politicians until politicians stand for you. Now, I shouldn't have mentioned Nader's name because that may turn some of you off with this list I'm going to read here. But forget about, I mentioned NATO, but this makes good common sense, I think, for you, especially over there, Rick. My conservative cameraman over here. We've been together for years. He always aggravates me. The issues and how they stand. We're talking about total U.S. military and corporate withdrawal from Iraq.
Notice how he does that.
And corporate
withdrawal.
We see these signs, bring the troops home, troops out of Iraq. Well, you got Blackwater and private armies over there. Mercenaries over there.
Right.
An excellent single-payer national health insurance. That's straightforward, simple enough. Not we're going to give you some money so that you buy your own insurance. You've got to have the insurance companies clear out of it. Single-payer national health insurance. And third, cut the bloated and wasteful military budget. Cut the bloated and wasteful military budget. I think the U.S. has spent more on armaments than the rest of the world combined for many, many years.
Right.
And so what's the reason for doing that? So that they can dominate and pursue American hegemony and imperialism and be the pursuing empire. Next one, limit living wage for all workers, $10 minimum. Living wage for all workers, $10 minimum. Yeah, wow. Next, no to nuclear energy, solar energy first.
Now this is an important one.
You can relate to that.
Absolutely. Sure. I mean, and Barack has connections to the nuclear industry coming out of Illinois.
And we will go back to that in a minute. Aggressive crackdown on corporate crime and rip-offs. That's the last one. Let's go back to nuclear energy. You have some personal experience with nuclear energy, Adam.
I do.
Will you say a few words about that?
Well, yes, I will.
History.
You know, when I first became aware of nuclear energy, ironically enough, it was basically when my father was talking to me about how, you know, one day he was basically repeating the line of what was then the Atomic Energy Commission, the U.S. regulatory agency that was responsible for both developing and regulating nuclear power. Later it got split into two entities, the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But you know, back when they were given that responsibility, they only had really one thing to do, which was to develop, because there was nothing to regulate. So they came out with all this heavy Madison Avenue public relations that conveyed the message that one day we would have this safe nuclear power. It would be so cheap to produce that they'd throw the meters away. And I remember my father telling me that. My father was a pharmaceutical salesman. He traveled. I used to go with him, you know, when I was a boy. And, you know, he'd talk to me. And so that was one of the things I remember him telling me. I didn't know anything about nuclear power. And then after I went through the experience of Vietnam, I'm, you know, kind of speeding up the story here.
Sure.
You were in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam. I was attempting to understand, you know, why we were at war, what that was all about. Spending a lot of time in the library, and I happened to come across a book called "Perils of the Peaceful Atom," which
Perils of the Peaceful Atom.
Yeah, written by Richard Curtis and Elizabeth Hogan. I can remember this book. The book's out of print, but it changed my life because this book basically attempted to tell the story of the nuclear fuel cycle. And as it began to tell the story, I suddenly woke up to the fact, you know, it was talking about the health effects of radiation, the potential problems of nuclear accidents, you know, the cost overruns. It was very well done. And, you know, I got about halfway through this book and I suddenly realized they were building the Trojan plant. Here I was in the process of, my daughter was in the process of...
The Trojan plant is what?
The Trojan nuclear plant.
Nuclear plant here in Oregon?
In Oregon, in St. Helens.
Okay.
And I was very concerned. And I remember being in the kitchen of this little house we were in and looking up at Diane, my daughter's mother, and saying, hey, you know, they build this plant, we should go to Canada. I mean, that was my kind of mindset at that time. You know, if things look bad, you
go somewhere else.
And then I turned the page over to the next chapter in the book, and the title of the next chapter was "Don't Bother Running," and it floored me. It really did. It was like, whoa, how'd you get in my head? You know, and I read that chapter, and it talked about how, you know, the Earth is round and it's a closed life support system, and, you know, if you have an accident like you did at Chernobyl, the radiation gets to Oregon, even though it's in the Ukraine. You know, it was a lesson of waking up about where you are in life, and I suddenly realized no place to run. I got to do something about it. So I began to educate myself about the problems of nuclear power. Now, the interesting thing is all these years have gone by, and, you know, I got involved in licensing proceedings and taught myself administrative law, and, you know, learned how to do all this kind of stuff. And where are we today? You would think, after watching all this crap that has gone down, you know, when the 9/11 occurred, what's the news story? Well, the news story is when Al-Qaeda was looking at targets, they were looking at the Indian Point nuclear reactor in New York City. If they'd hit the Indian Point nuclear reactor in New York City, we'd be living with the after effects of that to this day. It would have breached the reactor, it would have caused a massive radiation release. I mean, you know, it's a tragedy what happened with the towers, but this would have been 100 times, 1,000 times greater than anything that happens. And what are we doing? I just got invited to go on to a panel made up of 2 individuals from the Department of Energy that promote GNEP, which is the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, Bush's next plan for nuclear power, and somebody from EPA. And what are we talking about? Nuclear power as the answer to global warming. You know, and here, that's what I mean by this. I don't want to mess around with my future anymore. I'm not willing to go with the Clintons who, you know, already have got a track record. I like what Obama has to say, but you're right, it's generalities. Where's the substance? I want somebody, if I'm going to vote for somebody, if I'm going to give my sovereign vote to somebody to represent me, I want somebody who I know will do what's right. And I know that Ralph Nader will do what's right. That's where I'm at. If you don't like me because of that, or because you think that it brought us George Bush the last time around, which I think is one of the most phony arguments that you can make, and I invite you to take a look at the documentary on Ralph Nader's life, An Unreasonable Man. It really addresses those issues, and not only that, interviews the people that hate him. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. I just really want to cut to the chase and go with what is ultimately, I hope, going to make a difference in this world, and that's our own integrity in this.
Yeah, we certainly need some political leaders that actually tell the truth.
Right.
And speak truth to power.
So I'm sorry, Don, I got going there again.
No, I wanted you to go on, provoking you. Yeah.
Is that what's going on? You are so slick.
7 years have been done this. Yeah. So, of all the stuff going on that's critical to our survival, let's tick off the most important ones, like nuclear energy and what's going to happen if this
global warming, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, war period. You know, another one, nuclear weapons. My God, you know, we still got 50,000 warheads out there. And, you know, a lot of people don't know this, but the Bush administration is basically abandoning the treaties to abolish nuclear weapons, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, I think it was passed back in the 50s. It's all going into the waste bin, and we're going back into another one of these arms races. Craziness. Overnight, we're back into craziness again. You know, my heart aches over this stuff. That you asked me why I stay up late at night. You know, I don't know what, I'm just one person in this world, just like you guys. I'm nothing to, you know, hang out as an example of where it's at. But I care, and I want to do something about it. You know, I want to understand what the issues are and try and convey that information out to the people, in hopes that maybe somehow or another we're going to get our act together and really, really begin to have our own tipping point for the real world that we need to live in.
What do we need to do? What do my viewers need to do out there to make a difference, to have things go in the proper direction? What do the viewers need to do?
Well, I think all of us need to strive to act with greater integrity in the way that we deal with the issues in our life, the things that we confront, all of us, including me. I mean, I'm not hanging myself, again, I'm not hanging myself out there as somehow being any different than anybody else. You know, if you're, I do want to convey one thing to everyone. It's overwhelming to look at all this stuff, and I know what it's like to have those dark nights of depression when you think, Jesus, I can't do this anymore. You can't abandon yourself to that. You just can't. You've got to give life the credit that it needs in order to overwhelm.
How do you do that?
Well, you do that becoming
ABC, 1, 2, 3.
You do that in becoming involved. You get involved with Alliance for Democracy. You take on. I think it's important to think critically, because you need to look at the issues that are going to substantively make the change. And in my mind, that's the reason why taking back democracy is the issue. It's at the heart of all the issues.
And how do you do that?
Well, you
get
join
involved. Alliance for Democracy.
You get involved in the campaign to enact campaign finance reform, public financing of elections, instant runoff voting. You know, anything that helps improve
something.
Yes.
Just don't
slow food and slow democracy.
Right. And ask.
You really enjoy yourself.
Sometimes.
But I'm sure the viewers will never forget that. When I hear it again, I'm going to come haunt you, you know. What about the corporate media, the mainstream media? Their responsibility, I think they're probably as important as anything.
Oh, absolutely.
They're responsible for
doing
ignorance.
You're doing that now. I mean, you know, I realize you're against great odds. But, you know, you have persisted. You know, you've done this for 7 years. That's 52 weeks out of a year in which you've been addressing a whole slew of issues. Thank you. Thank you.
And write to people, to the representatives, state, local, and national, and speak up. And when you're out in public somewhere and you want to take a chance and wear your Ralph Nader T-shirt or whatever, so invite conversation, you know, and just speak up. So let me see if I can start talk about winding down here. I've got the high sign. We're running out of time here. Where's my page here? What'd you do?
Well, you turned the camera.
Here we go. It looks like it's close to time for us to stop. I can't do anything unless I got my script here. Keep your pens and pencils handy because you may want to jot down something that will show you in the closing credits. Thanks for watching. I invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show. And I mean that. It helps us to give you a better show in the future. And my email address is friendlydon@aol.com. My guest email address were up on the screen during the show. I hope you took those down. When you write, let me know if it's okay or not okay to read your email on the air. And for your real late tuners in, the channel servers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and whatever it is they want to talk about. I was looking for something I was going to read, but forget about it. Okay. Public service announcements, I got a few of those I want to lay on you. The Alliance for Democracy we talked about earlier. That's an organization that I found through David Delcare. There's the national website and phone number. Let's go to the Portland website and phone number, and David Delk is our co-chair. And the ACLU, I can't forget the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. They are the protectors of our civil liberties. Can't say too much about them. And if you think you've been stopped because of how you look, the ACLU is interested in racial profiling, and sometimes law enforcement becomes a little over-eager. I'm not anti-law enforcement by any stretch of the imagination. And the American Humanist Association is a favorite organization of mine. I've been a humanist for a long time. I'm also a humanist minister. And there's a national website, and let's go to the local chapter, Humanists of Greater Portland. We meet at Friendly House on Sunday mornings in Northwest Portland. There's our website and our phone number. And recommended TV programs: Do Democracy Now! On Dish Network, channels 3415 and 9410. And do Tom Hartman on AM radio, my good progressive left-wing radio guy. Before we say goodnight, I also want to say a big thank you to my wonderful crew, including Rick over there, and to the managers and teachers at the Tualatin Valley Community Television Studios in Beaverton, Oregon, where I produce and host the Conversations with Dr. Don shows. I also want to thank you, viewers in other parts of the country where you're watching. Thank you for watching. And for you Washington County, Oregon viewers, if you didn't get all the broadcast information we had up on the screen during the break, you can get it on the web at www.yourtvtv.org. If you live in another part of the country and are watching this show, contact your local community access cable TV studio for information about when they plan to broadcast Dr. Don shows in the future. You have a closing comment? You got about 10 seconds.
Well, I wish everyone well in the journey. I do.
Yes, and how about you?
Be involved, ask critical questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical thinking.
Again, thanks for coming on the show. And your contribution
Thank
has
you.
been outstanding. And my final thought for the day is the same one, KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too, and you too.
Thank you.
And you too. Thanks again, and good night.